Srila Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Divya Purusha Jaya Prabhupada. Atmavana Jaya Prabhupada. Bhakta Shrestha Jaya Prabhupada. Mahanubhava Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Guru Nudi Palaka Jaya Prabhupada. Guru Mana Santasa Jaya Prabhupada. Acharya Shrestha Jaya Prabhupada. Karuna Sindhu Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada.
This is the easiest process, that you come here and hear about Krishna. That's all. You haven't got to do anything. Simply come here. We are opening all the center just to invite you. Please come here and hear about Krishna.
Dina Bandhu Jaya Prabhupada. Krishna Dasa Jaya Prabhupada. Veera Jagat Guru Jaya Prabhupada. Chaitanya Dhuta Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada.
Shanta Murti Jaya Prabhupada. Talmeya Shikhara Jaya Prabhupada. Siddha Avadhuta Jaya Prabhupada. Paradukka Dukhi Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada.
So there is easy process is, it doesn't matter according to your qualification. You engage yourself in any one, but try to satisfy Krishna, then your life is successful.
Paschima Surya Jaya Prabhupada. Gita Pracharaka Jaya Prabhupada. Madhukula Rakshaka Jaya Prabhupada. Adhama Janara Bandhu Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada.
Atmajnani Jaya Prabhupada. Kirtanadayaka Jaya Prabhupada. Parama Pujita Jaya Prabhupada. Sada Shubha Chintaka Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada.
नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिन इति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. A very warm welcome to all of you on day 22nd of Srila Prabhupada LILA. Let there be a temple. In Mayapur, the construction is going on. Srila Prabhupada is living there with a very limited number of disciples. And in Bombay, the land has been acquired. It was a great battle and a glorious victory. Now let us see what was happening in Vrindavan. So this is March 1974, Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada was meditating on constructing his Krishna Balaram Mandir. In April of 1972, he had asked his disciple Hans Kielman, now Surabhi, who had drawn the plans for the Bombay Center, to execute drawings based on the design of Indian Renaissance architecture. Prabhupada liked the Govindji temple, located near the original Govindji temple constructed by Rup Goswami. He liked its open courtyard surrounded by many arches and its front steps leading up to the deity darshan area. He suggested that some features of the temple be incorporated into his temple. Surabhi, with the assistance of Vrindavan architect, executed the plans and Prabhupada approved. So as we know, Srila Rup Goswami constructed very huge, one of the oldest temples of Vrindavan, Sri Govind Dev Ji temple. And it was 7-story tall temple. And when Aurangzeb saw from his fort that there is a building which is taller than his own palace, he became envious. And thus he ordered the soldiers to break it down. But that was so nicely and strongly built, they could not tear down all the floors. So 3 floors still remained, 3 or 4. So it was very grand, very nicely made temple. And Prabhupada told Surabhi, the architects, the chief architect, who was leading all others, he was Prabhupada's initiated disciple, to incorporate many of those features into the Krishna Balaram temple. This will be the grandest temple in Vrindavan. Many high-class gentlemen in Delhi who are also devotees will relish the chance to live with us on weekends, and it will be for them just like Vaikuntha. You must construct something wonderful, otherwise it will be a discredit to you American boys. That will absolve the position of America and India. And this Vrindavan project is one of the most important of ours in ISKCON. So one of the most important element of devotional services to have association of devotees, to live with devotees. So Srila Prabhupada wanted to incorporate this very important element even in the life of people who are not full-time devotees of the temple. So thus Prabhupada told, and rather first Prabhupada constructed the guest houses even before the temple was ready, so that people can come and they can stay. So staying with the devotees is very, very important. If we cannot stay always, then at least on weekends we should come and live with devotees and engage in the service of deities in the association of devotees. So that is very, very important. That is food for spiritual life. And another important element is staying in Dham. So we cannot stay in Dham always, at least on weekend. So whether it be a place like actually Vrindavan Dham, or wherever we have the Hare Krishna temples where regulated worship of Krishna is happening. So there we can come, we can stay on the weekends. And just like people on weekends, they either waste time in sleeping or in movies or like that, some other kind of entertainment. So devotees want to utilize this time, both days of the weekend or at least one day, to stay with the devotees and full time engage in the service of Krishna. So thus Prabhupada thought that it was a very nice opportunity for the people of Delhi. Vrindavan is very close to Delhi. So they can all come, they can live here and thus advance in devotional service. Although Guru Das had been careful, Guru Das Prabhu was the main person in charge of the Vrindavan project. He had been careful to keep in touch with Prabhupada by mail. He had neglected certain important matters of Vrindavan, such as digging a well and getting city approval, things Prabhupada had repeatedly asked for. In the summer of 1972, Prabhupada wrote, "From the beginning I said I simply wanted a temple built in Vrindavan, just like Govindji's temple. And there have been so many letters, but that has not been done. Never mind, now I like that plan of Surabhi's." To build a temple in Vrindavan should not be so difficult, Prabhupada thought. and he became impatient with the delays. Concerned that the devotees and architects not make the building too costly, he said that they should go ahead with the plans he had approved, even if the building were to be a little cheaper than in the original plan. He was concerned that a competent disciple oversee the work so that ISKCON didn't get cheated. As early as April of 1972, Prabhupada had asked that the deities in Vrindavan be Krishna and Balram. Krishna may be black, Balram of white, and the pose in the back of the Back to Godhead magazine is very nice. How Lord Balram is standing with his hand resting on the shoulder of Krishna. So in that way, Prabhupada told the deity should be carved and installed here. He asked that a sign be put out front announcing Sri Krishna Balram Mandir. One reason Prabhupada chose Krishna Balram as the presiding deities was that most of the Vrindavan temples were of Radha and Krishna. ISKCON temple would be unique in Vrindavan. Another reason was that the ISKCON land was located in Raman Reti, an area of forest and soft sands, where Krishna and Balram had enjoyed their childhood pastimes 5,000 years ago. To celebrate and worship the youthful sports of Krishna and Balram in Raman Reti was fitting. Although thousands of years had passed since Krishna's advent in Vrindavan, the same atmosphere and many of the same sights and sounds still prevailed. Of course, now it has almost vanished, but that time when Prabhupada was there, it was still a forest area. Peacocks ran across the sands or sat on rooftops or in trees. The cooing and chirping of pigeons and cuckoos and the sweep of the parrot's green wings were eternal sounds and sights of the Vrindavan forest. In establishing a temple of Krishna and Balram, Prabhupada wanted to offer the peaceful, transcendental atmosphere of Raman Reti to all people, including visitors from abroad, commuters from Delhi, and his own disciples. Already he had received a letter from a major international travel agency requesting that he provide accommodations for tourists so that the ISKCON guest house could be included in official tours of spiritual India. People were always coming to India to tour the holy places. Unfortunately, most of the places were unauthorized or overrun by cheaters. ISKCON center, therefore, would be very important. Prabhupada wrote, "Have a European preaching center and try to enlist all the tourists and hippies who come to Vrindavan. Give them nice prasadam and engage them in chanting, cleaning the temple, and reading our books. Give them all facility for becoming devotees." After Prabhupada's 1972 visit during Kartik, he was away from Vrindavan for more than a year, directing things through correspondence. With the Krishna consciousness movement growing quickly on all continents, he had many places to visit. Still, his three main projects, Bombay, Vrindavan, and Mayapur, were his major subjects of correspondence and his greatest financial investments. One day during the massage, Prabhupada confided to his servant, "Most men are retired at my age. I do not want to manage anymore. I just want to do some writing." Prabhupada asked if there was some place in the world he could go for 6 months, a place where he would be all alone, where no one would come to disturb him, and where he would not get any mail. Prabhupada's servant suggested Tehran. Prabhupada considered it, then suggested New Vrindavan. He spoke of Mohandas Gandhi, who could not even sleep at night because people were always after him, even though he traveled incognito. That very day, Prabhupada is planning, now I should retire from all these managerial duties. You GVC men take care. I simply want to devote my complete time to writing. So devotees, of course, initially when we have started our spiritual life, as Nectar of Instruction mentions, Krishna's holy name, although they are very, very sweet like nectar, but one who is affected by the jaundice of nescience, ignorance, we may not feel the sweetness of Krishna's name, Krishna's form, paraphernalia, pastimes, and other things. But a pure devotee, he relishes the most. He can always chant Krishna's name. He can just keep on reading Bhagavatam, like Shukdev Goswami, Parikshit Maharaj discussed for 7 days continuously. But still, other duties have to be performed for spreading Krishna consciousness. So this is called an advanced level of austerity, advanced level of sacrifice. At first level, one is supposed to sacrifice the material comforts, because as long as we are indulged in material comforts, then we get more and more addicted to it, and the demand is always increasing, satisfaction never comes. So it is wise to minimize the material comforts of life. But when a person advances, not just a person gives up material happiness, but a person is willing to give up spiritual happiness also, just for the sake of service to Krishna. This is called real love. Love means I just want to work for the benefit of other person without caring for myself at all. So seeking spiritual happiness is our bona fide right, and every person can enjoy it. But still, devotees, it is mentioned that Krishna's charioteer, when he looks towards Krishna, he becomes overwhelmed by ecstatic emotions, and thus he cannot drive the chariot nicely. But that is important service of Krishna. So that is why he does not look towards Krishna. Otherwise, he will feel so much ecstasy, he won't be able to drive the chariot. So thus he gives up his spiritual pleasure so that chariot can be driven very nicely. So thus, a devotee of Krishna, he gives up all enjoyment, all happiness, material and even spiritual, and just wants to engage in service of Krishna. And he remains completely dependent on Krishna for any kind of pleasure Krishna is willing to give. But Srila Prabhupada also mentions that sometimes devotees are not able to chant to their heart's content. So devotees are very, very eager. They just want to chant the entire day, read the entire day, and the philosophy, Krishna's name, Krishna's bhajans are so enchanting. But Prabhupada tells, even though they are not able to chant to their heart's content because they have to do various duties for preaching work, so that others also can come to this stage of enjoyment with Krishna and attain eternal life. But Srila Prabhupada tells, at the end of the life, they get the same result. What a person could have enjoyed otherwise, completely dedicating full time in Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. A person has sacrificed all this enjoyment, but he has served Krishna, but he will get the same result at the end of life. So this higher kind of austerity Prabhupada took. Prabhupada just wanted to remain absorbed in Bhagavatam and was trying to find a center where nobody can disturb him. But for service of Krishna, Prabhupada gave up such spiritual pleasure also. There is no place like Vrindavan, but Prabhupada left Vrindavan to go to New York to live with people who were drinking, who were crazy, just so that Krishna's service can happen nicely. So this is advanced level of spiritual life, where a person simply is bothered about serving Krishna and spiritual master. And whether material happiness or spiritual happiness, whatever Krishna wants to give, he may give. Distress wants to give, he may give. So this is the most advanced attitude. And such a devotee becomes very dear to Krishna. But earlier today, his servant said, okay, that very day a letter came from Bhagwan in Paris inviting Prabhupada to tour his ISKCON centers in Europe. Immediately Prabhupada was enlivened at his invitation. He said he would go. But earlier today his servant said he wanted to go away alone. Prabhupada laughed. That will not be possible for me in this lifetime. Better I keep traveling and die on the battlefield. For a warrior, it is glorious to die on the battlefield, is it not? Guru Das had sent a letter to all ISKCON centers inviting devotees to attend the opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan. He had invited live members from Bombay and Calcutta and had reserved cars for them on the trains. Prabhupada also was inviting his disciples to come to Vrindavan for Janmashtami. Lecturing before hundreds of disciples in Los Angeles, he said, I invite all of you to come to Vrindavan for the grand opening of Krishna Balaram temple. Prabhupada had also mailed invitations to his god brothers, and when one of them accepted the invitation, Prabhupada replied, assuring him of accommodations and suggesting the easiest way to travel from Calcutta to Vrindavan. On July 15th, only 10 days before Prabhupada's proposed arrival for the grand inauguration ceremony, he wrote almost identical letters to his sannyasi disciples inviting them to come and resolve the many personal matters and items of business that had been pending during his busy tour. Except for Guru Das, however, none of the devotees in Vrindavan thought that building would ever be completed and be ready to inaugurate. Work was going on slowly as usual, and except for the DT hall area, the land was still a construction site. There were no altars, no DTs. They just thought. Guru Das so feared displeasing Prabhupada that he could not bear to admit that the building would not be ready. The date had been set, and Prabhupada did not want excuses. It has to be done by Janmashtami, he wrote. There is no question of delay. Guru Das admitted that the temple construction wouldn't be completely finished by Janmashtami, but he reasoned that the opening ceremony could still take place even if the final touches on the temple weren't done. Because there was no regular GBC secretary for India, it was very difficult in India at that time. So nobody could sustain. Disciple would come, he would go. And Prabhupada was struggling to manage the affairs. Thus, there was nobody but the single devotee Gurudas Prabhu who was in charge of Vrindavan temple, and he was so scared of Prabhupada, he could not tell Prabhupada by deadline work cannot be finished. He was always showing optimism, yes, Prabhupada, it would be done. Guru Dasa's version, therefore, was the only one Prabhupada had received. The end of July grew near, and devotees prepared to travel to Vrindavan for a fiasco. Vrindavan, August 4, 1974. When Prabhupada's car pulled up at the ISKCON's property in Raman Reti, a group of devotees greeted him with kirtan and flowers. Some 25 devotees from temples around the world had already gathered for the grand opening celebration, and along with the Vrindavan devotees, they crowded happily around Prabhupada. No formal walkways had been constructed, and Prabhupada walked through the half-constructed walls, past piles of sand and bricks, making his way toward the DT house. Even here, the lack of ornamentation and finishing was apparent, and rubble lay all around. What is this? Prabhupada demanded as he toured the construction site. There is nothing here. Where is the temple? You told me the temple was finished. Guru Das, Surbhi, Gunarnava, and others directly responsible were unable to answer. Their faces went white. Prabhupada was furious. How can you open this? The visiting devotees also began speaking among themselves. It's not ready. How can we open? But Prabhupada, said one devotee, devotees from all over the world are coming. Stop them immediately. Prabhupada said, there will be no opening. Prabhupada had burst the bubble, the illusion that they would be ready for the grand opening. Prabhupada's anger was frightening, and the devotees who surrounded him were no longer carefree and joyful. You are going to open this temple? Prabhupada scoffed. The altar is ready, said Harikesh, who had come from Japan to attend the opening. We can install the DT, and Prabhupada cut him short. You cannot open this temple, Prabhupada shouted. This temple is not completed. Prabhupada then walked into his house, followed by Vrindavan managers and few other leaders. Whoever could keep his distance from Prabhupada in this mood considered himself spared. Surbhi's wife ran off to pray to Krishna, afraid of Prabhupada's ferocity. Prabhupada was extremely angry. In his room, Prabhupada's anger only increased. He yelled at Guru Das for mismanagement. He yelled at Surbhi. He yelled at all of them. No one dared to offer suggestions or excuses. There was nothing to do but turn white and become depressed. Prabhupada suddenly inquired whether the temple could be opened despite the mess. Can you have the DT rooms ready at least? He turned to Surbhi. This is an insult to our society. What will people think? We have announced it everywhere. Nobody actually knows about it, Srila Prabhupada, Surbhi replied fearfully, exposing himself for another blast. Oh, Prabhupada somewhat changed his tone. You have not made any propaganda about it? No invitations? Not yet, Prabhupada. Not to the people in Vrindavan. They do not expect it to open because everyone who has been around the site, they know it's not ready for opening. This is a farce, Prabhupada scowled. It is a fiasco. Disgusted, he looked at his Vrindavan managers. We have to open. How can we open on Janmashtami? Srila Prabhupada, Surbhi said, the doors are not ready. They are still cutting the wood. Prabhupada inquired about the deities from Yamuna, who explained that their paraphernalia had been purchased but that the thrones were not ready. What is your opinion? He asked her. I am totally unqualified to speak, Yamuna said. And although I have no right to speak, I see it as almost impossible to actually open the temple. There is no pujari. With a sense of finality and failure, Prabhupada said, then we won't do it. But we have invited so many people from all around the world to come, and I was not informed of this. Now you all decide. When can we open? Prabhupada asked. Can we open on Diwali? October, Srila Prabhupada. How about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's appearance day? A devotee suggested. That is at the end of December. Prabhupada was silent, looking displeased. Surabhi spoke up. It will take 6, actually 7 months. Then Prabhupada chose the day of Ram Navami in April. The opening could coincide with the annual gathering of devotees in Mayapur and Vrindavan. Ultimately, Prabhupada's anger with his disciples was incidental, the reaction due them for their foolishness. It was also a way of instructing them and testing them, but deeper was Prabhupada's transcendental impatience and frustration that his devotional service in Vrindavan was still not manifested. He wanted a wonderful temple for the glory of the Krishna consciousness movement, a temple that would establish Krishna consciousness all over the world. It was an offering to his spiritual master and he had promised it to Krishna, but still it was not completed. And for Prabhupada's disciples' failure to do the job, Prabhupada had to take the burden and the agony of that failure. His disciples were his instruments in his service to Krishna. If the instruments didn't work properly, then he suffered. Just as when one's arms and legs fail to function, the whole body suffers. His disciples' failure to carry out his desires was his loss. In this way, he felt transcendental lamentation over their failure to open the Krishna Balaram Mandir on Janmashtami day. Prabhupada's disturbance, though transcendental, was nonetheless real. It was not feigned merely for instructing, nor could the devotees cheaply cheer up their spiritual master. For Prabhupada's disciples to properly assist him, they would have to understand his transcendental mood and serve him accordingly. Prabhupada wanted practical, down-to-earth service from his disciples. They should not expect to serve him sentimentally but should work hard. Devotional service was dynamic. Prabhupada wanted his disciples to help him with his projects to serve his Guru Maharaj, projects which, if successful, could save the world from misery. So thus this was Prabhupada's very important instruction. So sometimes the bhakti yoga or spiritual life is taken as something merely sentimental. If you are able to shed some tears and sing some bhajans in imitative spiritual ecstasy, then that is taken as advancement in bhakti. But Prabhupada told, so one disciple was there and he was singing very nice glories for Prabhupada, Sanskrit verses. There are many verses. So we are supposed to offer that. In front of a picture of Prabhupada, we can go and there is Prabhupada's Stotram, very nice prayers, which Anand Shastri, one of the Sanskrit scholars Prabhupada admires, he wrote for Prabhupada. And Prabhupada told, yes, if my disciples want to have increased their faith in me, they should chant this Prabhupada Stotram. Krishna eka cheta madmoha vinashakarin mad drishti gochara prabho prabhupada swamin. In this way, very nice 5 stanzas are there. And like this in Bhagavatam, various prayers are there. Kirata hunandra pulinda pulkasha abhira shumba yavana kasadeya. People who are not belonging to Varnashram system, they are tribals or meat eaters, cow eaters, all of them, Shuddhyanti tasmai prabha vishnave namaha yad apashraya shraya. If they take shelter of pure devotee of Krishna, then they can get liberated. Even such people can make perfect advancement in spiritual life. So like this, various glorification, various kinds of such prayers are mentioned in the scriptures and they should be offered for spiritual master. In this way, the relationship establishes, it becomes very strong and a person develops strong faith in the spiritual master. So this devotee was also offering such prayers. Whenever Prabhupada would come down he would go for morning walk, he would be there waiting and would start singing prayers. So one day when Prabhupada came down, he started singing prayers again. That it is by will of providence that we have got you as our spiritual master. So Prabhupada stopped. He planted his cane on the ground and there was a small puddle of water formed in the temple. So Prabhupada told, is it the will of providence that water should stay here? And that devotee became silent. I am offering praise to the spiritual master and he got chastisement. So then Prabhupada moved on in his morning walk. And Prabhupada, so the disciples asked Prabhupada, What was the reason for this? You corrected that disciple. So Prabhupada told, yes. So we have to understand this is Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is not merely sentimentalism, but it means working very expertly and working very hard for Krishna. So Prabhupada told devotee has got one quality which is called expert. What is expert? All of us are having various skills. So expert means whatever work we are doing, we should do it very, very nicely. And such work should be taken in the service of Krishna. So not that you do something and haphazardly you are not able to do it. So take some work. That work could be very small, either a menial service like brooming the floor, mopping it, cleaning the walls, painting it, or doing some repair work, or doing the artwork, or giving a lecture, or deity worship, cooking, anything, whatever we are doing. But that thing should be done with great expertise. So this is required from devotee. We should be very, very careful about doing whatever we are doing. It should be done with perfection, the task. So Prabhupada told we have to work with great attention, and we have to work very hard, and we have to work very, very expertly. So this is what Prabhupada expected from disciples. So just like we work outside, how people are so particular, they fix deadlines, and some countries, they finish their projects much before the deadlines. They do everything very systematically. Now here we are trying to serve the Supreme Lord, so things should be even more systematic. And this is what Prabhupada expected from his disciples. So thus Prabhupada would tell many times, spiritual life should be followed in a military discipline. You would have read in the purport of Bhagavad Gita also. Prabhupada mentions, even though such thing can make spiritual life difficult, nevertheless it has to be followed in that way. Thus in the temple, all of us are supposed to get up in the morning time. There is no excuse. At night, what was your seva? What time you slept? Or how you are feeling? What is your day going to be like? It is going to be it does not matter. A person has to get up in the morning and come for Mangala Arati. And then Prabhupada told Suyantritaha, like a machine, one has to work. Just like machine never stops, works on automation. In similar fashion, Prabhupada expected all the disciples to attend the entire program very nicely. Morning program, then after that chanting, then another arti, kirtan, then class. So like this, there should be no reason I could not attend this part. So like a machine, devotee should work very nicely. So the activities of the day should be fixed, they should be scheduled very nicely, and disciples should try to stick to it as far as possible, as close as possible. So thus one has to work with great expertise, and one has to work very, very hard in the service of Krishna. So when the disciples were showing this lackluster performance, Prabhupada was very disturbed. So Prabhupada told this thing in that puddle example, this is because of lack of Krishna consciousness. That work is not happening nicely. So thus Krishna consciousness is a very practical thing. Krishna is a person, real person. We are also real eternal personalities, and thus real work has to be done for satisfaction of Krishna with great care, attention, and expertise. Prabhupada wanted practical, down-to-earth service from his disciples. They should not expect to serve him sentimentally, but should work hard. Getting concrete was a big problem. Surbhi, Gunarnava, Tejas and others were always meditating and striving how to get cement. So that time emergency was imposed in the country. So the flow of cement was stopped in the country. It was very, very difficult to have it. Yet it seemed no cement was available in the whole of India, as month after month they waited for government permission. Daily since Prabhupada's arrival for the so-called temple opening, the devotees had been travelling by bus and rickshaw to Mathura to see if cement, even a few bags, was available. Sometimes they were cheated. One shipment of 20 bags had been cut with other materials, and when they used it in casting a column, it remained soft and for 4 days and finally crumbled. When at last enough cement arrived to complete the work, the devotees felt sure it had happened only because of Srila Prabhupada's presence. Prabhupada had Gunarnava count every bag of cement as it arrived. From 8 in the morning until 9:30 at night, the shipment kept coming on trucks, each truck with 4 coolies to carry the heavy bags on their backs into the storage. Gunarnava stood outside all day with pad and pen. Marking the receipt of each bag, Srila Prabhupada came out of the house several times to examine and watch gravely. In the evening, when they were finished, he called Gunarnava in. So, how many bags? Prabhupada asked, and Gunarnava gave the exact figure. Everything is locked away now? Prabhupada asked. Yes, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada talked about the cement as if talking about a shipment of gold. During February and March of 1975, Srila Prabhupada toured widely again, traveling eastward via Tokyo and Hawaii to Los Angeles. While traveling, he received word that Governor Reddy had accepted the invitation to attend the Vrindavan temple opening on Ram Navami. He also received an encouraging report from Surabhi assuring him that this time the temple opening would definitely take place. I am encouraged that you expect to have everything completed on time, Prabhupada wrote. This I want. Next, Prabhupada traveled to Mexico City, Mexico, and Caracas, Venezuela. He continued to travel quickly, stopping in Miami, Atlanta, Dallas, and New York, all within a month of his departure from India. He then went to London, stopped in Tehran, and returned to India on March 16. It was Prabhupada's 8th trip around the world in 10 years. Mayapur, March 23, 1975. For this year's festival, almost 500 devotees from around the world had gathered. So Prabhupada had requested all of you on Gaur Purnima festival around Ram Navami time, you should gather here in Mayapur. So thus 500 devotees from across the world, all the centers they had come. And Prabhupada, while taking his morning walks in the nearby fields, while entering the temple of Radha Madhav, or while lecturing from the Chaitanya Charitamrita was the central attractive feature. Each morning after giving the class, he would circumambulate the temple room followed by his disciples. So Srila Prabhupada personally was the greatest feast for the disciples because they only few of the GBC men, they were able to have association of Prabhupada. That too mostly by correspondence and letters and sometimes personally also. And other rank and file devotees, disciples, they were not so fortunate to have personal association of Prabhupada. Prabhupada would come once in a year to a center and then he would stay for 1 or 2 days and maybe little more at sometimes in some big centers, important centers. And that's all that their association of Prabhupada is all about. They would see Prabhupada sitting in a class, no personal interaction. Some of them were fortunate. Prabhupada looked at them, accepted a flower from them, and this was their association with Prabhupada. Simply by reading Prabhupada books, associating with Prabhupada's servants, they dedicated their lives. So, but they were getting all spiritual realization. Even though they are Prabhupada's disciples, Prabhupada had dynamic ways of guiding them. So thus it is not important to have physical presence. Even in Prabhupada's time, sometimes people tell, no, Guru should be there in physical body. Who will hold our hand and guide us? It was never the time, even in Prabhupada's time. It is never in the case of any of the glorious spiritual masters. In Gurukul also, one Guru would be there and he would manage thousands of disciples in the Gurukul. How he would manage? He would guide the senior most, they would guide their juniors. In this way, in Parampara, the knowledge flows. And one Guru is managing thousands of disciples. So thus it is a misconception, it is material concept that we need to have Guru sitting in one place and imparting instruction. Even materially we see now, we have wonderful examples of online sessions. People have recorded so many material Gurus and we can hear anytime the Vani is working. In a similar fashion, Prabhupada has left his Vani in the books in the form of lectures. Through his devotees, we can get Prabhupada's association. But this association is always personal. It is basis the disciple's service attitude. How devotedly, rigorously, hardworking the disciple is, and attitude-wise, the disciple should be very, very humble, submissive, gentle, having strong faith in spiritual master. To that degree, personally, the knowledge is reciprocated through various means. So thus, the biggest attraction for devotees to come to Dham was their association with Prabhupada, where for up to a week or so, they can see Prabhupada every day, hear classes from him, and have intimate association with him in the morning walks and otherwise. Coming out into the bright morning sunshine, he would walk up, Yes. For this year festival, almost 500 devotees from around the world had gathered, and Prabhupada, while taking his morning walks on the nearby fields, while entering the temple of Radha Madhava, or while lecturing from Chaitanya Charitamrita, was a central attractive feature. Each morning after giving the class, he would circumambulate the temple room followed by his disciples. A brass temple hung from the ceiling on either side of the deity's altar, and Prabhupada, while circumambulating the deities, would go up to one of the bells and ring it several times, pulling the rope while the kirtan continued wildly. And then, with cane in hand, he would walk around the back of the deity altar, emerge on the other side to ring the other bell. And devotees would jump up and down close around him, singing Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Smiling with great pleasure, Prabhupada would continue the length of the temple room to the first bell again and strongly ring it. And Prabhupada would encourage his disciples to jump higher and higher. So Prabhupada told this very nice. So you jump high, it is exercise for the body, very nice exercise, and you make spiritual advancement and get ecstasy. So this dancing is so good. So Prabhupada was very pleased that if you dance like this enthusiastically, then Bhakti Vinod Thakur personally will come here and take you back to Godhead. So enthusiasm is very, very important element. So in the temple, Krishna is personally present, Balram is personally present, Gaur Nitaya present, Prabhupada is present. So the personalities are sitting there. So if we dance there with full enthusiasm, with heart full of gratitude that God is personally here and he has come here to reciprocate for my whatever small service I can offer. So I should be so glad he has come here to take me back, to stop my birth and death. So with such faith and with great enthusiasm, whatever energies we have got, all the energy should be spent for Krishna. So singing and dancing in kirtan are very easy ways and very, very delightful, ecstatic ways of spending one's energy on Krishna. So Prabhupada mentions, Lord Chaitanya has mentioned, this is very simple process. By singing, dancing and honoring prasadam, even a dog can go back to world, what to speak of human beings. So these things all of us can do. We can sit together with family, with friends. We can sing Hare Krishna, dance in front, place a Krishna's picture and dance very nicely, especially Lord Chaitanya's picture. Krishna in his incarnation as Lord Chaitanya, he is specifically worshipped by this Sankirtan Yajna. That is the way of worshipping Krishna in Kali Yuga. So one is supposed to worship the Chaitanya incarnation of Lord Krishna by the process of Harinam Sankirtan. So simply by placing Panchatattva picture in the front and doing Kirtan in front of them, we can make our spiritual life successful. After half a dozen such blissful circumambulations, he would leave the temple while the Kirtan continued to roar. Coming out into the bright morning sunshine, he would walk up the broad staircase to his room. Prabhupada again supervised the annual meeting of his governing body commission and personally approved or modified all their decisions. ISKCON was indeed growing. But as Prabhupada had told his friend, the aged Gopal Acharya in Madras, Krishna and Krishna's institution are not different. If the devotees are thinking of Krishna's institution, they will not forget Krishna. By insisting on the devotees' participation in the annual Indian pilgrimage, Prabhupada was solidifying the spiritual basis of ISKCON, his transcendental institution. To gather his devotees like this was the reason he had prayed and struggled to erect centers in the Dhamas. He wanted to extend the purifying shelter of Mayapur and Vrindavan to all his followers, and now and in the future. Bit by bit, the plan was coming together. The whole world was being saved by Lord Chaitanya's movement. April 16, Vrindavan. When Srila Prabhupada arrived to finally conduct the Krishna Balram Mandir opening, he was pleasantly surprised to see the 3 tall domes rising over the temple. The domes had been constructed entirely during the 8 months since his last visit. The 4-story international guest house had also been completely built during his absence. Surabhi had supervised workers in day and night shifts to get everything done on time. The tall central dome and 2 side domes, one over each altar, were magnificent. Their graceful form led the mind to higher thoughts and suggested an existence beyond the material world. The strength and beauty of the domes reminded one that beneath resided the deity of the Supreme Lord. A temple was to enlighten people to remove their nescience, and the domes eloquently spoke of this purpose. They could be seen for miles, rising boldly above the landscape of Vrindavan, proclaiming the worship of Krishna and Balram. Each dome was topped by a copper kalasha consisting of three balls representing lower, middle, and higher planets. And at the top, the eternal Sudarshan Chakra, the spinning wheel weapon of Lord Vishnu. The Sudarshan Chakra was Krishna himself. So, although Sudarshan Chakra is uh, it appears like a disc, but everything in spiritual world is completely full of consciousness. So Lord Krishna has expanded himself in the form of his disc weapon also. So that is called Lord Sudarshan or Sudarshan Chakra. That is also Lord Krishna himself. And just to see this glorious symbol atop the mandir made the devotees feel victorious and satisfied. Even the guests could not help but regard it with awe. Atop the Sudarshan Chakras were copper victory flags. As Prabhupada toured the complete building, he continually looked up at the domes. Oh, he said, the domes have come out very nice. What do you think? He turned to the devotees accompanying him. They are magnificent, said one devotee. Yes, Prabhupada smiled. Everyone is telling how nice Surabhi is doing. Prabhupada turned to Surabhi, who had gone with little sleep for weeks. But I can't say that. Only me, I am criticizing you because that is my job. I have to always criticize the disciples. So, when in Srimad Bhagavatam, Ved Vyas is criticized by Narad Muni. So now Ved Vyas is incarnation of Krishna himself, and he is being criticized, chastised rather, by Narad Muni. So, a disciple asked Prabhupada that, Prabhupada, how is it possible Narad Muni is criticizing Ved Vyas? So Prabhupada told, yes, Narad Muni is spiritual master of Ved Vyas. So he can chastise him in any way he likes, anytime he likes. So it is told, Tadayet bhavo guna, lalayet bhavo dosha. If we pamper too much disciple or children, then so many faults they come up. And Tadayet, if one is very strict, one chastises bhavo guna, then many great qualities arise in the disciples and in the children. But of course, once they are grown up, Chanakya Pandit says, Praptam tu shodashe varshe. Once they are 16 years old, then like a friend they should be treated. Otherwise, before 16 years is reached, chastisement is very, very important. Then all good qualities will come. So Prabhupada told it is the duty of the spiritual master to keep on chastising the disciple so that he can become very nice devotee and perfect in character. But I can't say that. Only me I am criticizing you because that is my job. I have to always criticize the disciples. No less than 600 devotees from ISKCON centers around the world had come to Vrindavan as part of the annual Indian pilgrimage. The high point was to be the installation of deities and opening of the temple. Many important life members and guests had come and were staying in their private rooms in the 40-room guest house. Prabhupada's vision had finally come to pass. He had created probably the most beautiful and opulent temple in Vrindavan, certainly the one most alive with dynamic devotion and preaching spirit, and along with it had built one of the best local hotels for visitors with an eye for Krishna Bhakti. Hotel means ISKCON's guest house. Touring the grounds, Prabhupada walked into the sunken courtyard, its marble floor clean and dazzling. This was no rented house in America, something built for another purpose. It was a temple, like the temples in Vaikuntha described in Srimad Bhagavatam. So temples are there in Vaikuntha, spiritual world also. It is heaven on earth, Prabhupada said. I think it surpasses all the temples in India. Prabhupada stood smiling before the tamal tree. Its venerable branches spread throughout one corner of the courtyard, and he recounted how there had been a discussion of cutting it down and he had prevented it. Tamal trees are associated with the pastimes of Srimati Radharani and are very rare. In Vrindavan, there were perhaps only three, one here, one at Seva Kunj, and one in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple. That the tamal tree was growing so luxuriantly, Prabhupada said, indicated that the devotees were performing genuine bhakti. Convinced that the temple was actually ready, Prabhupada entered his residence, just between the temple and the guest house. Many details demanded his attention, and many visiting disciples were present. Thus, in Raman Reti, in a place where there was no temple, a pure devotee desired, let there be a temple, and seva, devotional service. And what had once been an empty lot was now a place of pilgrimage. Such is the power of the desires of the pure devotee. So, thus, pure devotee is called Satya Sankalpa. Satya Sankalpa means whatever he desires, it is fulfilled. Because pure devotee is having no desire independent of the desire of Krishna. He desires only satisfaction of Krishna. He takes delight only in fulfilling such desires. And Krishna makes sure that whatever the desires are nurtured in the heart of a pure devotee, they meet fulfillment. So thus, somehow or the other, we should try to get the attention of a pure devotee of Krishna. And if they desire our liberation, then Krishna grants it very easily. And that is the only way of making our spiritual life perfect. So this is how many devotees were able to praise Prabhupada. And Prabhupada told, just like you are making a house for Krishna here, the temple in Vrindavan, similarly Krishna is making a house for you in the spiritual world. So Prabhupada was very much pleased by the sincere attempts of the devotees. So how do we serve Prabhupada? Can we make temples? Yes, the same order stands now also. In every town and village, there has to be a temple. So there is no limit, no dearth of such missionary opportunities. So we save money for our personal enjoyment. That enjoyment stays only for a few moments or days. You go for a foreign trip or you spend it on a very expensive house, and it doesn't give us lasting happiness. It is just illusion. So rather, if you live a simple life and use all that money in service of Prabhupada, in building very nice temples, or if not temple, some seva we can do like that. If we can please Prabhupada, then we also can make advancement. But not everybody can afford that. Not everyone has got so much money, does not matter. There was another seva in which every disciple was involved in Prabhupada's time. In temple construction, only limited disciples were there. But this kind of seva was open to all and was the foundation of the movement. And this seva is the most important order of Prabhupada. And how devotees please Prabhupada by this very important seva, and it ushered a new revolution in the Hare Krishna movement and thus around the world, we will understand in the upcoming 3 sessions. So very important segment is going to come. Do not miss the upcoming sessions in which we will understand this most important seva and the final pastimes of Prabhupada. So that was all about the construction of temple, Prabhupada's projects which were very, very dear to him, the 3 important temples in India. Thank you so much for hearing. We'll meet tomorrow again. Please do not forget to write your realizations in the comments, and please try to share the video and try to like it as well. We'll meet again tomorrow. Hare Krishna.